So, in the wake of the fires ravaging across LA, we need to sort of talk about climate change and how climate change and climate catastrophes are here to stay and are only going to get worse. So, I'm just going to use the BBC article on it that is very recent to just kind of, go at points and talk about it, and then we'll talk on more about climate refugees and how the climate crisis is just going to get worse and what we need to do to solve it. So, as you can see, across multiple parts of California, well, at least multiple parts of Los Angeles County, there are fires raging. And the problem is they're on the two opposite sides of basically LA. Been to LA, it is crazy to see the amount of damage of areas I myself have seen with my own eyes. And, I think the news really went in on it because of this area catching on fire. The Palisades are where a lot of the ultra wealthy live, so there is that sort of hypocrisy that a lot of the reporting is going on about the areas where the ultra rich are living, and there's very little being said about the many homeless people that live in California who, are not going to get the same treatment as, say, these ultra wealthy people are when it comes to where they're going to stay, who's going to look after them, are the fire departments getting them out of areas that are dangerous. Even when you're, even like Sunset is catching on fire, that is very central Hollywood, that is a densely populated area. There are homeless people there. There are people who are not, ultra wealthy like the people who live here in the Palisades. And so, with climate catastrophes going to get more and more likely, this inequity we will see in responses is something that we also need to keep an eye out and address, because the authorities will prioritize the ultra wealthy. That is not something that we can, there's no two ways around it. When there were storms in the US, the hurricanes that came, the areas that were most affected were poor areas in the south of the US, and guess what? It took a long time for aid to get there, both state and federal level, and those people, media aren't really talking about them anymore. They are still struggling. Flint, Michigan, we're basically concentrating on the US here. The people there are still struggling with not being able to drink clean water. Media doesn't really talk about it because most of the people in all of these areas are poor. When it comes to Palisades, they'll talk about it a lot. You've got celebrities living there, you've got realtors living there. You don't really have poor and working class people living in these areas. But let's move on to kind of why these fires started. And, it's very easy to say it's climate change because it is. So there are droughts all across LA and high winds. High winds, may be less likely caused by climate change. The droughts 100% caused by climate change. And so dry land, drought-ridden land, and extremely hot weather, even for this time of year, combine that with high winds, you're going to have widespread fire. And these things are going to happen more and more globally. California has seen a massive uptick in fires in my lifetime. It seems every single year I'm seeing reports of widespread fires in California. You're seeing fires across parts of the global south, and it is just going to get worse as temperatures rise year on year. Every year we're getting hotter summers. Every year we're getting hotter winters. It's 40 degrees some summers here in the UK. That was unheard of 10 years ago. We were lucky to get 30 degrees temperatures. We're getting 40s, 35s, 36s regularly. We have areas in Asia that are consistently 40 to 50 degrees basically for the entirety of the summer, which even for there wasn't super common. And so, a lack of rain, strong winds, high temperatures, dry land, all of these things come together and culminate to cause these catastrophes. And so you're going to see more need to invest in preventing these catastrophes, but there isn't enough money to go around. LA had to cut their fire service budget by 17 million. A lot of people are pointing the finger primarily at the mayor, and yes, the mayor did have to decide to cut 17 million. However, the local area of LA does have a lot of conservative influence, and it was conservative elements that really, really pushed for this big cut to the fire department and to give that money to the police department, because the police department, that money is used to attack the homeless people who are not going to get help when it comes to things like wildfires. If it were to come to earthquakes, I know earthquakes aren't really going to hit places like Los Angeles hard, but still in California, San Francisco gets hit hard by earthquakes. Who are the first people who are going to be protected in earthquakes? It's going to be the ultra wealthy. It won't be the homeless people who the police in Los Angeles are designed to attack. So it's all linked. It is all down to, this greed from capitalists and conservatives. You had, rich people coming out and saying, why isn't there a private fire service for us in the Palisades? Your fire service, you have one. It's just conservative elements of your county wanted there to be cuts, and so there were cuts. And guess what? You're in a wildfire-prone state, let alone city, and this is kind of what happens. We're now on the UNHCR website. Feel free to pause and read the information on the screen. I think it's very useful. But we are going to see a huge uptick in refugees who are going to be affected by climate change. We already have areas of the world that are becoming more and more inhospitable, and a lot of those places are in the global south. This is going to cause a knock-on effect of there being more refugees. We are already seeing the widespread demonization of refugees in much of the global north, across Europe, across North America. Refugees and anyone who basically doesn't fit the WASP look or phenotype, if you want to get into race science and all that stuff, anyone who doesn't look like that is being demonized. And it's going to cause more and more issues. If you are a person who does not like refugees, for some reason, I don't know what's wrong with you, you need to actually start taking a stance on climate change. Because if you want to reduce the number of refugees coming to your country, you should really encourage your government to invest more in climate change, to invest more in preventing climate change even, although some countries want to increase climate change seemingly. So when you have these far-right parties coming out here talking about how net zero doesn't make sense, how investing in renewable energy is useless, how we should be drilling for more oil and more gas and burning more coal, that is all basically in part so they can continue this rhetoric of, let's invest more in fossil fuels. The knock-on effect is there's more refugees and there's more people for them to blame. Is that going to be directly the thought process? Maybe. Some of them are probably smart enough to know that there is that link and that they can take those vulnerabilities of that many people unfortunately have developed and use them to play against people to help ensure their power. There is a reason that all of these anti-refugee groups are so pro-fossil fuel, because it is cheap, it is easy, and despite it destroying the global south, it causing people from the global south to look to move to areas in the global north, they can then use those people as a way to garner more support from elements of the population who have been convinced that it is the refugees that are harming them and not the ultra-rich and the ultra-wealthy. And the thing is, people only consider this aspect of climate change. A lot of the time we are seeing right now in California people talking about how it looks like a third world country. The problem is these third world countries look like that because of the effects of the global north on them historically over the centuries and over the decades. But also, the global north is going to be facing all of those disasters, all of those catastrophes, whether it be stuff like the wildfires we're seeing across the United States, whether it be the flooding we see in the UK. if you remember the images coming from parts of the north of the UK, in places like Scotland, the flooding was horrible. It was devastating. Whether we see the Netherlands struggling even more with rising water tides and, them needing to spend more money on reclaiming land from the ocean. Stuff like that's crazy. Or if it's just complete natural disasters. Japan are supposedly looking to prepare for the next mega earthquake within the next 20 to 30 years. The refugees from there, it's going to be insane. You technically have refugees in the United States from the hurricanes they had around the election season last year. There's going to be growing refugees coming from the global north as well. And people in the global north, maybe that will cause them to take climate change seriously, because instead of them viewing it as, oh, it's the third world countries who are suffering, it is now us who are also suffering, and it may cause them to invest in it. But the way politics seems to be going in North America and Europe, that doesn't seem like the case. It seems like we're going to continue down this path of, pushing for the opposite of renewable energy, pushing for the opposite of net zero, as we refer to it in the UK, and then causing more and more people to become climate refugees, and those people are going to be demonized. Why? Because they are, unfortunately, easy scapegoats. All this is to say, you need to care significantly more about climate change. When you see climate activists doing things, you need to actually care about why they are doing them. If you see initiatives to help with the climate, whether it be from charities, whether it be from your local government or national government, look into them, see how effective they are, see how you can help change them and make them even more effective. Look into being more sustainable. Try and force the company you work for to be more sustainable. If you work for a major corporation who clearly are not sustainable, major corporations are some of the biggest drivers, the biggest causes of these issues we are facing. No, they are not maybe. They are the biggest causes of this. You need to basically get together with people who work alongside you and force them to change, because that is the first step we need to take. It's probably not the best step. It is probably not the fastest step, but it is a step in the right direction. So do that. And also, it means you'll talk to people you work with. It's kind of an important thing when it comes to organizing, So please take what's happening in these wildfires across California and use it as fuel to radicalize you towards being more informed about climate change. Stop using AI. Be more sustainable. Make your place of education or place of employment be more sustainable, because the mass movement is the only way we are going to stop climate catastrophes getting worse and harming people significantly more, particularly people in the global south.